The mountain had kept Wade Mercer hidden for 3 years, until the woman with the bruised wrists asked if her son could eat his leftovers. What happened next turned a simple act of kindness into a deadly chase through the Colorado wilderness, where stolen documents, hired killers, and a corrupt mining empire collided in ways no one could predict. This is that story. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this tale travels. And if you stick with me until the end, hit that like button. You won't regret it. Now, let me take you back to the summer of 1878. The heat in Silver Creek didn't just settle. It pressed down like a hand over your mouth until breathing felt like work. Wade Mercer felt it the moment he rode into town that afternoon, dust clinging to his beard, his horse moving slow beneath him. The animal was tired. Wade was tired. But supplies didn't replenish themselves, and the mountain cabin where he'd spent the last 3 years didn't have a general store. Silver Creek was the kind of town that pretended to be civilized. It had a bank, a church with a crooked steeple, and a main street wide enough for 2 wagons to pass without scraping paint. But civilization was thin here, stretched over something rawer. You could see it in the eyes of the men loitering outside the saloon, in the way the shopkeeper's smile never quite reached his eyes, in the desperation that clung to the place like the smell of horse manure and May smoke. Wade didn't care much for towns anymore. Hadn't cared for people much either, not since Rebecca died. That was 4 years back, when a flash flood took her and half the settlement they'd been trying to build in the valley. Wade had been away, tracking game. Came back to find mud where his house used to be, and silence where his wife's laughter should have been. He'd buried what he could find of her. Then he'd buried himself in the mountains. Now he came down only when he had to. Twice, maybe 3 times a year. Bought flour, salt, coffee, ammunition. Spoke to exactly nobody unless money was changing hands. Then he disappeared back into the wilderness where the trees didn't ask questions and the creeks didn't judge. Today should have been no different. Wade tied his horse outside Brennan's mercantile and went inside. The place smelled like leather and pickle brine. Old Brennan nodded at him from behind the counter, didn't try to make conversation. Wade appreciated that. He moved through the narrow aisles, gathering what he needed: flour, 2 pounds of coffee beans, a box of cartridges for his rifle, salt pork wrapped in brown paper. "That all?" Brennan asked when Wade set everything on the counter. "That's all." Brennan tallied it up on a scrap of paper, his lips moving silently. "Comes to $4.30. Wade counted out the money, coins he'd earned selling pelts to a trader up north. He didn't ask for a receipt. Brennan didn't offer one. "You need help carrying that?" "No." Wade gathered his supplies and walked back into the sunlight. The street was busier now, miners coming off shift, women with baskets heading toward the market, a couple of kids chasing a dog that had stolen someone's hat. Wade loaded everything into his saddlebags, checked the straps twice, and was about to mount up when his stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten since dawn. He stood there for a moment, considering. He could ride out now, make camp by Willow Ridge before dark, eat jerky and hardtack under the stars like he always did. Or he could get one hot meal in his belly first, something that wasn't cooked over a smoky fire, something that didn't taste like ash and loneliness. The decision surprised him, but he was already walking toward the saloon before he could talk himself out of it. The Lucky Strike saloon was loud, crowded, and smelled like sweat, whiskey, and tobacco smoke. Wade pushed through the doors and immediately regretted his choice. Every table was full. Men shouted over each other, cards slapped against wood. Someone was playing a fiddle badly in the corner. It was too much noise, too many people, too much life pressing in from all sides. He almost turned around, but then he spotted an empty stool at the bar, and the bartender, a thick-necked man with a mustache that looked like a dead caterpillar, waved him over. "What'll it be?" "Steak," Wade said. "Potatoes if you got 'em." "We got 'em. Drink?" "Water." The bartender smirked like Wade had said something funny, but he didn't comment, just turned and shouted the order through a window to the kitchen. Wade sat down, kept his back to the wall out of habit, and watched the room without really seeing it. The steak came 15 minutes later, overcooked, tough, swimming in grease. The potatoes were barely warm. Wade ate anyway. It was better than jerky. He was halfway through the meal when he felt someone watching him. Not the casual glance of a stranger in a crowded room. This was different, focused, intentional. Wade's hand moved toward the knife on his belt before he even looked up. Then he saw her. A woman stood 3 feet away from his table, thin and pale, wearing a dress that might have been nice once but was now faded and dusty. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that had started to come undone. She wasn't old, maybe 30, maybe younger, but she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. And she was staring at his plate, not at him, at the food. Wade stopped chewing. She noticed him noticing. Her face went red, and she looked away quickly, like she'd been caught stealing. But she didn't leave. She just stood there, one hand gripping the wrist of a young boy beside her, 7, maybe 8 years old, with brown hair and eyes too big for his face. The boy was staring at Wade's plate too. No, not staring. Starving. Wade set his fork down slowly. "You need something?" The woman opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir. I was wondering if—" She swallowed hard like the words were fighting her. "If you're not going to finish that, could my son and I—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Wade looked at the boy again. The kid's clothes hung loose on him, like he'd lost weight recently. His face was hollow. His lips were cracked. "You're asking if you can have my leftovers," Wade said. It wasn't a question, but the woman nodded anyway. The shame in her eyes was so raw it almost hurt to look at. "Yes, sir. If you're done with it." Wade wasn't done with it. He was still hungry. But something in the way the boy's hand clutched his mother's skirt, something in the way the woman held herself, proud, despite everything, made him push the plate across the table. "Sit down," he said. The woman blinked. Sit. Both of you." She hesitated, glancing around the room like she was expecting someone to stop her. When no one did, she pulled the boy into the chair across from Wade and slid in beside him. The kid didn't wait for permission. He grabbed a piece of steak with his bare hands and shoved it into his mouth, chewing fast like someone might take it away. "Eli, slow down," the woman whispered, but there was no real force behind it. Wade watched them eat for a moment, then turned toward the bar. The bartender was already looking at him, one eyebrow raised. "2 more plates," Wade said. "Same as before." "You paying?" "I'm asking, aren't I?" The bartender shrugged and shouted the order into the kitchen. Wade turned back to the table. The woman was staring at him now, her eyes wet. "You don't have to—" "I already did," Wade said. "Don't make it a thing." She swallowed whatever she'd been about to say and nodded. Then quietly, "Thank you." Wade didn't respond. He wasn't good with gratitude. Didn't know what to do with it. The new plates arrived, and the woman and boy ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Maybe they hadn't. Wade sat back and sipped his water, pretending not to notice the way the kid's hand shook when he picked up the fork, or the way the woman kept glancing toward the door every few seconds like she was expecting someone to walk through it. It was that last part that got Wade's attention. "You in some kind of trouble?" he asked. The woman froze, a piece of potato halfway to her mouth. No trouble." She was lying. Wade had spent enough time around liars to know what it looked like. "You waiting for someone?" "No." "You keep looking at the door." Her jaw tightened. "I'm just cautious." "Cautious," Wade repeated. "That what we're calling it?" The boy, Eli, looked up from his plate, his eyes darting between Wade and his mother. The woman reached over and put a hand on his arm, a gesture that was both protective and nervous. "We're fine," she said. "Really. Thank you for the meal. We'll get out of your way." She started to stand, pulling the boy with her. "Sit down," Wade said. It wasn't loud, wasn't a command, but something in his voice made her stop. She sat back down slowly, her hand still on Eli's arm. Wade leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice low. "I don't know what you're running from, lady, but if you walk out of here looking like that, you're going to draw attention. And I'm guessing attention is the last thing you want." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Wade nodded toward her left sleeve. "Your wrist. It's bruised." She pulled her arm back instinctively, covering the sleeve with her other hand. But it was too late. Wade had already seen it. Dark purple marks, finger-shaped, wrapped around her wrist like someone had grabbed her hard and wouldn't let go. The woman's eyes filled with something Wade recognized. Not just fear, trapped fear. The kind that came from knowing there was no good way out. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Doesn't look like nothing." She didn't answer, just stared down at her plate, Her jaw clenched so tight, Wade thought she might crack a tooth. The boy looked up at Wade, and for a second the kid's face was so serious it didn't belong on someone that young. "He hurt her," Eli said quietly. "Eli," the woman started, but the boy kept going. "He hurt her a lot, and he said he's going to find us and take us back." The woman's hand tightened on his arm. "Eli, that's enough." But the boy didn't stop. His voice got smaller, shakier. "I don't want to go back. Please don't make us go back." Wade didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't good with kids, wasn't good with people. But the look in that boy's eyes, the raw, desperate plea, it hit something in Wade's chest he thought had died years ago. He cleared his throat. "Who's he?" The woman shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It does if he's coming here." "He's not. We're leaving. Tonight." "Where are you going?" She hesitated, then, "North. Maybe Denver." "You got money for that?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Wade sat back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. This wasn't his problem. He didn't know these people, didn't owe them anything beyond the meal he'd already paid for. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to let them walk out that door and forget he ever saw them. But then he looked at the boy again, saw the fear in his eyes, the hunger that wasn't just about food. And Wade thought about Rebecca, about how she used to tell him that kindness wasn't about convenience, that if you could help someone and you didn't, you were choosing cruelty. He'd spent 3 years on a mountain trying to forget those words. Didn't work. Wade sighed, long and slow, and hated himself a little for what he was about to do. "What's your name?" he asked the woman. She blinked, surprised by the question. "Clara. Clara Whitmore." "Clara." Wade nodded. "I'm Wade, and I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. "Is someone hunting you?" Her face crumpled, just for a second, before she forced it back together. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Yes." "Who?" "My husband." Wade had figured as much. "And he's the one who gave you those bruises." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "He's looking for me," Clara said quietly. "He hired men, trackers. I don't know how many, but they're good. And they're close." "How close?" "I don't know. A day, maybe less. I saw one of them in the last town watching me. We left before he could follow, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "They'll find us eventually. They always do." Wade leaned forward. "Why is he so determined to find you, just because you left?" Clara's hand moved to the small leather bag hanging from her shoulder. She held it close, protective. "It's not just about me," she said. "I took something he needs back." "What'd you take?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked around the room, checking to see if anyone was listening. Most of the saloon was too drunk or too loud to care, but Clara still lowered her voice until it was almost a whisper. "Documents, ledgers, proof of everything he's done." "Everything he's done," Wade repeated. "Meaning what?" Clara's jaw tightened. "My husband is Victor Whitmore. He owns half the silver mines in this territory, and he didn't get them legally." Wade had heard the name before. Everyone in Colorado had. Victor Whitmore was rich, powerful, and connected. The kind of man who could buy politicians the way other people bought cattle. "You're saying he's corrupt," Wade said. "I'm saying he's a monster." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "He's stolen land from families who couldn't fight back. Bribed officials, forged documents. There are people who tried to stand up to him, and they..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "They disappeared, and no one asked questions because everyone's afraid of him." Wade processed that. "And you've got proof?" "Yes." "Why'd you take it?" "Because I couldn't stay anymore." Clara's eyes were fierce now, angry. "I couldn't watch him destroy more lives. I couldn't let my son grow up thinking that's what a man is supposed to be." She looked down at Eli, who was listening quietly, his small hand gripping hers. "So I took the ledgers. And I ran." Wade rubbed the back of his neck. This was worse than he thought. If Victor Whitmore had hired trackers, they weren't just looking to bring Clara home. They were looking to recover evidence that could destroy him, which meant they'd do whatever it took to get it back. "You planning to turn those documents over to someone?" Wade asked. That's the idea. If I can get to Denver, there's a federal commissioner who might actually care, might actually do something. That's a big might. It's the only chance I have. Wade didn't disagree. But Denver was a long ride, and if professional trackers were already on her trail, she wouldn't make it halfway. You got a horse? He asked. Clara shook her head. We came on the stagecoach. I used the last of my money for the tickets. Of course she did. Wade sat back, weighing his options. He could walk away right now. Let Clara and her boy figure it out on their own. It wasn't his fight, wasn't his responsibility. But that little voice in the back of his head, the one that sounded too much like Rebecca, wouldn't shut up. If you can help and you don't, you're choosing cruelty. Damn it. Wade stood up, pulling a few coins from his pocket and dropping them on the table. Come on. Clara blinked. What? You can't stay here, and you sure as hell can't walk to Denver. Wade gestured toward the door. I've got a place in the mountains. It's remote, hidden. No one's going to find you there. Clara stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. You're offering us shelter? For now, until we figure out what to do next. Why would you? Don't ask me that, Wade said, cutting her off, because I don't have a good answer. Now get the boy and let's go before someone notices. Clara hesitated, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick. But whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she nodded and pulled Eli to his feet. Thank you, she whispered again. Wade didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the door. And that's when everything went wrong. They were halfway across the saloon when a man stepped into their path. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like granite and eyes that didn't blink. He wore a long duster coat despite the heat, and the way he stood, weight balanced, hands loose at his sides, told Wade this wasn't some drunk miner looking for trouble. This was a professional. Afternoon, the man said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. But there was nothing friendly in the way he looked at Clara. She froze. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Whitmore, didn't expect to see you here. Clara's hand tightened on Eli's shoulder. The boy pressed against her, trying to make himself smaller. Wade stepped forward slightly, putting himself between Clara and the man. You know this fella? Clara didn't answer. Couldn't, maybe. The man's eyes flicked to Wade, sizing him up in about 2 seconds. I don't believe we've met. Name's Crow, Silas Crow. Wade didn't offer his own name. You need something, Crow? Just having a conversation with the lady. Crow's smile widened. That a problem? Depends on the conversation. Crow tilted his head slightly, like he was amused. You're protective. I respect that. But this doesn't concern you, friend. Wasn't aware we were friends. The room had gone quieter. Not silent. People were still talking, still drinking. But the volume had dropped just enough that Wade knew others were watching now, waiting to see how this played out. Crow seemed to notice too. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace, though Wade didn't buy it for a second. No need for this to get ugly, Crow said. Mrs. Whitmore, your husband's worried about you. Wants you to come home, that's all. I'm not going back, Clara said. Her voice shook, but she got the words out. Now see, that's not really your decision to make. Crow's tone was still calm, still reasonable, like he was explaining something to a child. You took something that doesn't belong to you. Mr. Whitmore wants it back. It doesn't belong to him either, Crow shrugged. That's between you and your husband. My job's just to bring you home safe. She's not going anywhere with you, Wade said. Crow's eyes snapped back to Wade, and for the first time the smile dropped. You really want to do this? Wade didn't move. You heard the lady. She's not going back. You don't know what you're getting into, friend. Told you already, we're not friends. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Crow's hand drifted toward his hip, where Wade could see the edge of a holstered revolver peeking out from under the duster. Wade's hand moved too, settling on the handle of his knife. For 3 long seconds, neither man moved. Then Crow laughed, short and sharp, and took a step back. All right, he said, holding up his hands again. All right. I'm not looking for trouble. Not today. Anyway. He looked past Wade to Clara. But Mrs. Whitmore, you should know, your husband's offering a reward for your return, $500. That's a lot of money in a town like this. He let that hang into the air for a moment, making sure everyone in the saloon heard it. Wade saw the way a few heads turned, the way a couple of men exchanged glances. $500. That was more money than most of these miners would see in a year. Crow smiled again, knowing exactly what he'd just done. Think about it, Mrs. Whitmore. You can come with me now, nice and peaceful. Or you can try to run and see how long it takes before someone else decides that reward's worth the effort. He tipped his hat, turned, and walked out of the saloon. The noise returned slowly, conversations resuming, glasses clinking, the fiddle starting up again. But Wade could feel the shift. People were looking at Clara now, calculating. "We need to leave," Clara whispered. "Now." Wade didn't argue. They moved fast, slipping out the back door of the saloon into an alley that smelled like piss and rotting food. Wade led them through a maze of side streets, keeping to the shadows, until they reached the hitching post where his horse was waiting. "Can you ride?" he asked Clara. "Yes." "Good. You're taking the horse. I'll walk." "What? No, I can't." "You can, and you will." Wade was already untying the reins. "We need to move fast, and you've got the boy. Horse'll carry both of you better than me, walking with one of you on my back." Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't have time. Wade helped Eli up into the saddle first, then Clara climbed up behind him. "Where are we going?" she asked. "North, into the hills. There's a trail about 2 miles out that'll take us into the high country. Once we're there, they won't find us." "You're sure?" "No," Wade said honestly, "but it's better than staying here." He grabbed the reins and started walking, leading the horse out of town at a pace just fast enough to look purposeful, but not panicked. The last thing they needed was to draw more attention. Behind them, Silver Creek faded into the dust. They walked for an hour before Wade let them stop. The sun was sinking toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The air was cooler up here, the smell of pine replacing the stink of the town. Wade found a spot off the trail where a cluster of rocks provided some cover. "We'll rest here for a few minutes. Let the horse drink." Clara slid down from the saddle, helping Eli down after her. The boy's legs wobbled when he hit the ground, and Clara had to steady him. "You doing all right?" Wade asked the kid. Eli nodded, but he didn't say anything, just leaned against his mother, exhausted. Clara sat down on one of the rocks, pulling Eli close. She looked up at Wade, her face pale in the fading light. "Why are you helping us?" she asked quietly. Wade didn't answer right away. He busied himself checking the horse's hooves, adjusting the saddlebags, giving himself time to think. Why was he helping them? He'd asked himself that question a dozen times since they left the saloon, and he still didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was because the boy reminded him of the child he and Rebecca had never gotten to have. Maybe it was because Clara's bruises reminded him of every time he'd seen a man hurt someone weaker, and he hadn't done anything to stop it. Or maybe it was just because he was tired of being alone. "Doesn't matter why," Wade said finally. "What matters is getting you somewhere safe." "But you don't even know us." "Don't need to." Clara shook her head slowly. "Most people wouldn't do this. Most people would have let Crow take me." "Then most people are cowards." She smiled faintly at that, though there was no humor in it. "You're not like most people." Wade didn't respond. He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an accusation. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the wind move through the trees. Then Eli spoke up, his voice small and tired. "Are we going to be okay?" Clara stroked his hair. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be okay." "Promise?" She hesitated just for a second. "I promise." Wade hoped she was right, but as he looked back toward the trail, toward the town they'd left behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, and the worst was still ahead. They reached the cabin just after midnight. The moon was high and bright, casting silver light across the clearing where Wade's home sat. A rough structure of logs and stone that looked like it had grown out of the mountain itself. It wasn't much. One room, a stone fireplace, a roof that leaked when it rained hard. But it was hidden, tucked into a fold of the hills where no trail led and no map showed. Clara slid off the horse first, then helped Eli down. The boy was asleep on his feet, swaying like a drunk. Wade caught him before he fell. "Inside," Wade said quietly, carrying the boy toward the door. The interior was dark and cold. Wade laid Eli on the narrow bed in the corner, then moved to the fireplace and started building a fire from the pile of kindling he kept dry in a wooden box. The flames caught quickly, throwing warm light across the small space. Clara stood in the doorway, looking around. Wade tried to see the place through her eyes. The single chair, the rough table, the piles of furs and supplies stacked against the walls. It probably looked like a cave. Felt like one, too, most days. "It's not much," Wade said. "It's safe," Claire replied. "That's more than we've had in weeks." She moved to the bed and pulled a blanket over Eli, tucking it around him gently. The boy didn't wake, just curled onto his side and kept breathing deep and steady. Wade poured water from a jug into a dented tin cup and handed it to Clara. She drank it all without stopping, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she said. Again. She'd said it at least a dozen times since they left Silver Creek, like she was afraid Wade would change his mind if she stopped. "You can stop thanking me," Wade said. "I don't know how else to—" "Then just stop." Clara nodded, but her eyes were still full of something Wade didn't want to name. Gratitude, maybe. Or guilt. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. She sat down on the floor near the fire, pulling her knees up to her chest. Wade noticed the way she winced when she moved, like her ribs hurt. Probably did. He'd seen enough injuries to recognize the way someone held themselves when something inside was bruised or broken. "You need to rest," Wade said. "I can't. Not yet." "You've been running for how long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. I lost track." Wade sat down in the chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Tell me about your husband." Clara's jaw tightened. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. If we're going to figure out how to keep you alive, I need to know what we're up against." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. "Victor Whitmore is 43 years old. He owns 12 silver mines across Colorado and Wyoming. He's got business connections in Denver, contracts with the railroads, and half the territorial government in his pocket. He's rich, he's powerful, and he's used to getting what he wants." "How long were you married to him?" 8 years. "And he hit you the whole time?" Clara flinched at the bluntness of the question, but she didn't deny it. "Not at first. At first he was charming, generous. He courted me like I was someone important. My family didn't have money, and Victor made me feel like that didn't matter. Like he chose me because he loved me, not because I was useful. But that changed. Everything changed after we got married." Clara's hands tightened around her knees. "He didn't need to be charming anymore. He had what he wanted. And once Eli was born, I became, I don't know, a possession. Something he owned, like the mines or the horses." Wade didn't say anything, just let her talk. "The first time he hit me, I was pregnant," Clara continued. "I'd asked him about some business papers I'd seen in his study. Papers that didn't make sense, property deeds signed over to him by families I knew, families who'd lived in the valley for generations. He told me it wasn't my concern. I pushed. He backhanded me so hard I fell down the stairs." Wade's hands curled into fists, but he kept his voice steady. "You stayed." "Where was I supposed to go?" Clara's voice cracked. "I had no money, no family close enough to help. And Victor made sure everyone knew I was his wife, his property. Anyone who helped me would have made an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory." "What about the law?" Clara laughed, bitter and sharp. "The sheriff works for Victor. The mayor works for Victor. Everyone works for Victor one way or another. You don't build an empire like his without making sure no one can touch you." Wade leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what changed? Why run now?" Clara reached into the leather bag she'd been carrying since the saloon. She pulled out a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth and set them on the floor between them. "Because I found these." Wade picked up the bundle and unwrapped it carefully. Inside were ledgers, pages and pages of handwritten entries, dates, amounts, names. He flipped through them slowly, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach turn. Land transfer, payment received, no survivors, case closed. "What am I looking at?" Wade asked. "Victor's records," Clara said. "Every piece of property he's stolen, every bribe he's paid, every person who got in his way and didn't live to regret it." Wade's eyes snapped up. "He killed people?" "Not directly. He hired men to do it, but yes, there are at least a dozen names in those ledgers, people who refused to sell their land or who threatened to go public with what they knew. They all disappeared. and Victor made sure it looked like accidents, or they just vanished. Wade set the ledgers down like they were burning his hands. And you took these from him. I had to. It's the only proof that exists. Victor keeps everything locked up tight, but I spent 8 years in that house. I learned where he hid things. I waited until he was gone on business, and I took them. He knows you have them. He knows. That's why he sent Crow. That's why there's a price on my head. Wade rubbed a hand over his face, trying to process it all. He'd known Clara was in trouble, but this was bigger than a woman running from an abusive husband. This was evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in Colorado, and now Wade was sitting in the middle of it. "Why didn't you go straight to Denver?" he asked. "Why run through small towns where people could see you?" "Because I didn't have enough money for a direct stagecoach," Clara said. "I had to work my way there, town by town, taking whatever coach I could afford. I thought if I moved fast enough, stayed quiet enough, I could get there before Victor's men found me." "But they found you anyway." "They always do." Clara's voice was hollow now, exhausted. "Victor doesn't give up. He doesn't lose. And if I don't get these ledgers to someone who can actually do something with them, he'll find me. He'll take Eli, and he'll make sure I never run again." Wade stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. The forest was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. He didn't like it. "How many men does he have looking for you?" Wade asked. "I don't know. Crow was the only one I saw in Silver Creek, but Victor wouldn't send just one tracker. He's too careful for that." "So we assume there's more." "Yes." Wade turned back to her. "And they'll come here eventually." Clara's face went pale. "You think they followed us?" "I think Crow's smart enough to know you didn't disappear into thin air. He'll search the town first, ask questions, offer money for information. Someone will remember seeing you leave with me. Someone always remembers." "Then we're not safe here." "Not forever, but for tonight we are. They won't track us in the dark, and by morning we'll be gone." "Gone where?" Wade didn't answer right away. He was working through it in his head, trying to figure out a path that didn't end with all of them dead in a ditch. "There's a stage stop about 30 miles northeast of here," he said finally. "Remote. Not many people use it anymore since the new railroad line opened up. But there's still a coach that runs through twice a week, headed straight to Denver." Clara's eyes lit up with something that might have been hope. "You think we can get there?" "If we move fast and stay off the main trails, yeah. But it's rough country between here and there. Steep climbs, narrow passes. Not easy with a kid. Eli's tougher than he looks." Wade glanced at the boy, still sleeping soundly under the blanket. "He's going to have to be." Clara stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "What about you? Once we get to the stage stop, you can come back here. Go back to your life. You don't have to—" "I'm not leaving you until you're on that coach," Wade said, cutting her off. "Crow's not the only one you need to worry about. There are men out there who'd turn you in for half the reward Victor's offering. You need someone who knows how to fight." "And that's you?" Wade didn't answer, didn't need to. Clara studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out what kind of man would throw his life away for two strangers. "You lost someone," she said quietly. Wade's jaw tightened. "That's not your business." "I'm right, though. Aren't I?" "Doesn't matter." "It does if it's the reason you're helping us." Wade turned away, staring back out the window. "Get some sleep. We leave at first light." Clara didn't push, just nodded and moved to the bed, lying down next to Eli. She didn't take off her dress, didn't get under the blanket, just curled around her son and closed her eyes. Wade stayed by the window, watching the darkness, waiting for movement that didn't come. Not yet. The fire burned low. The night stretched on, and somewhere out there, in the shadows beyond the clearing, Wade knew men were coming. They were always coming. Morning arrived cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. Wade had slept maybe an hour, dozing in the chair with his rifle across his lap. Clara and Eli were still asleep when he went outside to check the area. The clearing looked the same as always, quiet, empty, untouched. But Wade's instincts were buzzing, that familiar prickle at the back of his neck that told him something was wrong even when everything looked right. He circled the cabin twice, looking for tracks, broken branches, anything that didn't belong. Found nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. When he came back inside, Clara was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with Eli's head in her lap. The boy was still asleep. his face soft and peaceful in a way that made him look even younger than 7. "We need to go," Wade said. Clara nodded and gently shook Eli awake. The boy blinked up at her, confused for a moment, before memory caught up and his face tightened with fear. "It's okay," Clara whispered. "We're safe, but we need to keep moving." They ate a quick breakfast, dried meat and stale bread that Wade had stored in a tin. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Eli ate slowly, like his stomach had forgotten how to handle food. Wade packed light, just the essentials. Water, ammunition, a bedroll, the ledgers wrapped carefully and tucked into his saddlebag. Everything else could stay. If they made it to Denver, he wouldn't need any of it. And if they didn't, well, it wouldn't matter. By the time they set out, the sun was barely visible through the clouds. Wade led the horse, Clara and Eli riding together like before. They moved northeast, cutting through dense forest where the trees grew so close together it felt like walking through a tunnel. Wade didn't follow trails. Trails were predictable, and predictable meant dangerous. Instead, he navigated by landmarks he'd learned over 3 years of wandering these mountains. A lightning-split pine, a creek that ran cold even in summer, a rock face shaped like a broken tooth. They walked for hours without talking. The only sounds were the horse's hooves on soft earth, the rustle of wind through branches, and the occasional bird call. Eli dozed in the saddle, his head resting against his mother's chest. Clara stayed alert, her eyes constantly scanning the forest around them. It was late afternoon when Wade finally called a halt. They'd reached a narrow creek that cut through a ravine, the water rushing fast and loud over smooth stones. "We'll rest here," Wade said. "Let the horse drink. Refill the canteens." Clara slid down from the saddle and helped Eli to the ground. The boy stumbled, his legs stiff from hours of riding, but he didn't complain, just walked to the creek and splashed cold water on his face. Wade knelt beside the water and filled the canteens, keeping one eye on the trees. Still nothing. But that buzzing feeling in his gut was getting louder. "Wade." He turned. Clara was standing a few feet away, her face tight with worry. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about Crow being smart." "Yeah?" "If he's smart, he won't just track us through the forest. He'll figure out where we're going." Wade frowned. "You think he knows about the stage stop?" "I think he knows we need to get to Denver, and there are only so many ways to do that. If I were him, I'd send men to every coach station, every railhead, every river crossing between here and there." Wade stood up slowly. She was right. Crow wouldn't just chase them. He'd get ahead of them. "So what do you want to do?" Wade asked. "I don't know, but we can't just walk into a trap." Wade looked at Eli, who was sitting on a rock near the creek, kicking his feet in the water. The kid looked happy, for the first time since Wade met him. It didn't seem fair to drag him through hell just to end up dead at a stage stop. But what choice did they have? "We keep going," Wade said. "But we'll be careful. Scout the station before we approach. If it looks wrong, we don't go in. And if it looks wrong, then what?" Wade didn't have an answer for that. They rested for another 20 minutes, then kept moving. The terrain got rougher as they climbed higher into the mountains. Steeper slopes, loose rocks, patches of snow that hadn't melted despite the summer heat. Eli struggled to keep up, his small legs working twice as hard as theirs. Wade ended up carrying him for the last mile, the boy clinging to his back like a monkey. By the time they stopped for the night, all 3 of them were exhausted. Wade found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock where they could build a small fire without it being visible from a distance. He rationed out the last of the dried meat and gave most of his portion to Eli. The boy ate it without a word, then curled up in the bedroll Wade laid out for him. He was asleep in seconds. Clara sat beside Wade, staring into the fire. She looked worse than she had that morning, pale, bruised shadows under her eyes, her hands shaking slightly when she reached for the water canteen. "You need to rest," Wade said. "So do you." "I'll rest when you're safe." Clara turned to look at him, the firelight catching in her eyes. "Why are you doing this, Wade? Really?" Wade poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting up into the night. "I told you. Doesn't matter." "It does to me." He sighed, long and heavy. "You want the truth?" "Yes." "I don't know." Wade tossed the stick into the flames. I spent 3 years on this mountain telling myself I was fine alone, that I didn't need people, didn't want them. But then you walked into that saloon and asked for my leftovers, and he trailed off, shaking his head. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired of hiding. Clara didn't say anything for a moment, then quietly, Your wife, how did she die? Wade's hands tightened. Flash flood, 4 years ago, took out half the settlement we were building. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them. Wade wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that helping Clara and Eli felt like he was doing something Rebecca would have been proud of. But the words wouldn't come. They never did. They'd yum. Eventually, Clara lay down next to Eli, and Wade took first watch. He sat with his back against the rock, rifle across his knees, listening to the forest. And that's when he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Horses. Wade was on his feet in an instant, moving to the edge of the overhang. He crouched low, scanning the darkness below. At first he saw nothing. Then, about a quarter-mile downslope, he caught a flicker of movement. Torchlight, maybe, or moonlight reflecting off metal. Someone was down there, and they were moving toward the overhang. Wade moved back to the fire and kicked dirt over it, smothering the flames. The darkness closed in fast. Clara, he whispered urgently. She woke immediately, her hand going to Eli. What is it? We've got company. Her face went white. How many? Don't know yet, but we need to move. Now. Wade grabbed the saddlebags while Clara woke Eli. The boy was groggy, confused, but Clara got him on his feet and kept him quiet. Wade led them away from the overhang, moving higher into the rocks where the shadows were thicker. They crouched behind a cluster of boulders, watching the area they'd just left. A minute passed. Then 2. Then the riders appeared. There were 3 of them, moving slowly through the trees on horseback. One carried a torch, the light swinging back and forth as he scanned the ground. Looking for tracks. Wade recognized the man in front. Even in the dim light, there was no mistaking that broad-shouldered frame, that long duster coat. Silas Crow. Clara's hand found Wade's arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. Wade put a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. The riders reached the overhang and dismounted. Crow walked to where the fire had been and knelt down, pressing his hand against the dirt. Still warm, Crow said, his voice carrying in the quiet night. They were here less than an hour ago. One of the other men, younger, nervous-looking, glanced around. Think they saw us coming? Probably. Crow stood up, brushing dirt off his hands. But they can't have gone far, not with a kid slowing them down. You want us to keep tracking them tonight? Crow shook his head. Too risky. We don't know the terrain, and they do. We'll camp here, pick up the trail at first light. The nervous man looked relieved. The third rider, silent, older, with a scarred face, just nodded. Wade watched as they unsaddled the horses and started setting up camp. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how they'd been found. He'd been careful, hadn't left obvious tracks, hadn't built fires big enough to see from a distance. But Crow had still found them, which meant he wasn't just good. He was better than Wade had hoped. Clara leaned close to Wade's ear, her voice barely a whisper. What do we do? Wade didn't answer right away. They were trapped. Higher ground above them, armed men below. If they tried to move now, they'd make noise, and if Crow heard them, it was over. But they couldn't stay here either. Once the sun came up, Crow would see their tracks leading up into the rocks. Wade made a decision. We wait, he whispered back. Let them settle in. Once they're asleep, we move. And if they don't sleep, then we improvise. Clara didn't look happy about that answer. Neither was Wade. They waited in the darkness, watching Crow and his men set up camp. One of them built a fire, bigger than Wade's had been, confident they didn't need to hide. The smell of coffee drifted up through the trees, and Wade's stomach growled despite the danger. The hours crawled by. Eli fell asleep again, his head in Clara's lap. Wade stayed alert, his rifle ready, watching for any sign the men below were moving. Finally, around midnight, the nervous rider lay down and closed his eyes. The scarred man took first watch, sitting by the fire with his gun across his knees. Crow didn't sleep. He sat on a rock, staring into the flames, his face unreadable. Wade waited another hour. Then, Moving as slowly as he'd ever moved in his life, he signaled Clara to wake Eli. They started climbing. Not down toward the men, but up and around, looping back through the rocks in a wide arc that would bring them down on the other side of the ridge. It was slow, painful work. Every step had to be silent, every rock tested before putting weight on it. Eli was incredible. The kid didn't make a sound, just followed his mother's lead, stepping exactly where she stepped. It took them almost 2 hours to circle around the ridge and start heading back down. By the time they reached lower ground, Wade's legs were shaking and his lungs burned, but they'd made it. Crow and his men were still camped back near the overhang, and Wade had put nearly a mile between them. "Keep moving," Wade whispered. "We don't stop until dawn." They walked through the rest of the night, stumbling through darkness, fear pushing them forward faster than exhaustion could slow them down. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Wade looked back one last time. The mountains were silent, no riders, no torches. But Wade knew better than to feel safe. Crow was still out there, and he wasn't giving up. By noon, they'd reached the stage stop, though calling it that was generous. It was more of a ruin than a building, a sagging structure of weathered wood with half the roof missing and windows that no longer had glass. A rotted sign hung crooked over the door, the words too faded to read. The place looked like it hadn't seen a stagecoach in years, let alone twice a week like Wade had claimed. Clara stared at it, her face falling. "You said coaches still ran through here." "They do," Wade said, though even he wasn't sure anymore. "Or they did, last I heard." "When was that?" Wade didn't answer. Truth was, he'd heard about this place from a trapper almost 2 years back, and the man had been half drunk when he'd mentioned it. Could have been lying, could have been confused. Wade had gambled everything on information that might not even be true. "We should check inside," he said, more to fill the silence than anything else. The door hung loose on its hinges, and when Wade pushed it open, the smell that rolled out was damp wood and animal droppings. The interior was worse than the outside. Broken furniture, a counter covered in bird shit, holes in the floorboards big enough to break an ankle. But on the wall, tacked up with a rusty nail, was a schedule. Wade walked over and pulled it down, brushing away cobwebs. The paper was yellowed and brittle, but the ink was still legible. "Denver line," Wade read aloud. "Tuesdays and Fridays, arrives noon, departs half past." Clara moved beside him, looking over his shoulder. "What day is it?" Wade had to think about that. They'd left Silver Creek on what, Saturday? Spent one night at his cabin, another on the trail, then walked through the night to get here. "Monday, I think. Maybe Tuesday." "You think?" "I've been a little busy to keep track." Clara took the schedule from his hands, studying it like it might reveal something Wade had missed. "If today's Tuesday, the coach should be here in—" She glanced at the sun through the broken roof. "Less than an hour. If it comes at all." "It has to." Clara's voice had an edge of desperation now. "It has to, because if it doesn't, we're stuck here with nowhere to go, and those men getting closer every minute." Wade walked back outside, scanning the area. The stage stop sat at a crossroads where two dirt paths intersected. One ran east-west, the other north-south. The Denver route would come from the west, he figured, which meant they'd see it coming from a distance. But it also meant anyone else watching the road would see it too. "We need to get off the road," Wade said. "Find somewhere we can watch without being seen." Clara looked around, holding Eli's hand tight. "Where?" Wade pointed to a cluster of rocks about 50 yards from the building, just inside the tree line. "There. We'll have a clear view, and if trouble shows up, we can slip back into the forest." They gathered their things and moved to the rocks. Wade positioned them so Clara and Eli were hidden behind the largest boulder while he crouched at the edge, rifle ready, eyes on the western road. Eli sat with his back against the stone, pulling his knees up to his chest. He hadn't said much since they'd fled the camp last night, just followed wherever his mother led him, quiet and small. "You doing all right, kid?" Wade asked. Eli nodded, but he didn't look up. Clara put a hand on her son's shoulder. "He's tired. We all are." "Coach comes. You'll be able to sleep all the way to Denver," Wade said. "Comfortable seat, roof over your head. Better than walking." Eli finally looked up, his eyes too old for his face. "What if the coach doesn't come?" "It'll come." "But what if it doesn't?" Wade didn't have a good answer for that, so he settled for honesty. Then we figure something else out. Like what? I don't know yet. Clara shot Wade a look that said not helping, but what was he supposed to do? Lie to the kid? Tell him everything would be fine when they were being hunted by professionals with guns and a fat reward hanging over their heads? Eli, Clara said gently, why don't you close your eyes for a bit? Rest while we wait. I'm not tired. You're exhausted. So are you. Clara didn't argue with that, just pulled the boy close and held him, her chin resting on top of his head. Wade turned his attention back to the road, watching the empty stretch of dirt that might deliver salvation, or nothing at all. The minutes crawled past. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the rocks, until Wade could feel the heat radiating off the stone. He was starting to think the schedule was wrong, that the coach had stopped running this route months ago when Clara suddenly grabbed his arm. Wade! He looked where she was pointing, not at the western road, at the southern one. 3 riders were approaching, moving slow, scanning the area like they were looking for something, or someone. Wade's hand tightened on his rifle. Get Eli down. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Clara pulled the boy flat against the ground, covering him with her own body. Wade positioned himself at the edge of the boulder, just far enough to see but not be seen. The riders got closer. Wade could make out details now. The lead horse was a big gray, the kind that cost money. The man riding it wore a clean shirt despite the dust, and his hat was new, not one of Crow's men. Someone else. The riders stopped in front of the stage stop, dismounting and looking around. The man in the clean shirt walked up to the building and peered inside, then came back out shaking his head. Place is abandoned, he called to the others. You sure about that? One of the other men asked. He was older, with a beard going gray. Take a look yourself if you don't believe me. The bearded man walked over to check, and while he did, the third rider, younger, thin, nervous energy, started walking the perimeter. His eyes swept across the landscape, and for one heart-stopping second, Wade thought the man was looking right at them. But the rider's gaze moved on, and Wade let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. So what now? The nervous one asked. We supposed to wait here? That's what Crow said, the clean shirt answered. Station's a logical place for them to run. We watch it, and if they show up, we take them. And the mountain man? What about him? Crow said he's dangerous. Said he handled himself in the saloon like he knew how to fight. Clean shirt shrugged. 3 against 1. I like our odds. Wade didn't like hearing that he was expected, which meant Crow had figured out exactly what Wade had hoped he wouldn't, where they were going and why. Clara had been right. They'd walked straight into a trap. The 3 men settled in to wait, tying their horses to a post near the building and sitting in the shade of the overhang. One of them pulled out a deck of cards, and they started playing, but their rifles stayed close and their eyes kept sweeping the area. Wade backed away from the edge and turned to Clara. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. They're waiting for us, she whispered. I know. What do we do? Wade looked at the road again, then back at the men. We wait too. Coach comes, we figure out a way to get on it without them seeing. How? Working on it. Clara's hands were shaking. Wade, if they catch us, they won't. You can't promise that. No, Wade admitted, but I can promise I'll do everything I can to make sure you and Eli get on that coach, even if I don't. Clara's breath caught. What does that mean? It means if it comes down to it, I'll keep them busy while you run. Get Eli on the coach and don't look back. I'm not leaving you to... You will if I tell you to. Wade's voice was firm, no room for argument. Your job is to get those ledgers to Denver. My job is to make sure you can do that. We clear? Clara looked like she wanted to fight him on it, but she just nodded, her jaw tight. They waited in silence after that. The sun beat down. The men at the station played cards and smoked and laughed at jokes Wade couldn't hear. Every minute felt like an hour. Then, finally, Wade heard it. The distant rumble of wheels and hooves. The stagecoach was coming. Wade risked another look. The coach was still about a quarter-mile out, moving at a steady pace. It was a battered old thing, the kind that had seen better days, pulled by 4 horses that looked just as tired as Wade felt. At the station, the 3 men had heard it too. They stood up, cards forgotten, hands drifting toward their guns. Get ready, Wade whispered to Clara. Ready for what? To run when I tell you. The coach got closer. Wade could see the driver now, an old man with a gray beard, a shotgun across his lap. There didn't appear to be any passengers inside, which was either good luck or bad depending on how this played out. The coach pulled up to the station and stopped. The driver climbed down slowly, his joints stiff, and nodded to the three men. "Afternoon," the driver said. "Afternoon," Clean Shirt replied. "You headed to Denver?" "That's the plan." "You got room for passengers?" "Depends." "You got money?" Clean Shirt smiled. "We're not looking to ride. We're looking for someone who might be." The driver's face went carefully neutral. "That's so. Woman? About 30? Dark hair? Traveling with a young boy? Seen anyone like that?" The driver shook his head. "Haven't seen much of anyone today. You three are the first people I've come across since I left Marble Creek this morning." "You sure about that?" "Son, I'm old, not blind." Clean Shirt's smile tightened. "There's money in it for you if you remember seeing them." "Good money." The driver considered that for a moment, then spat into the dirt. "And there's trouble in it for me if I lie to folks like you, so I'll say it again. I haven't seen anyone matching that description." Wade felt a flicker of respect for the old man. Takes guts to turn down a bribe when you're outnumbered and unarmed. Clean Shirt's patience was wearing thin. "We're going to search the coach. Be my guest. It's empty." The nervous one walked over and pulled open the coach door, checking inside. "Nothing," he confirmed. The bearded man was looking around again, his eyes narrowed. "Maybe they haven't got here yet." "Maybe," Clean Shirt said. "Or maybe they're close by, waiting for us to leave." "So what do we do?" "We stay. Let the coach go on and we keep watching." The driver climbed back up onto his seat. "You boys planning to stand there all day, or can I get moving?" "You're free to go," Clean Shirt said. "But if you do see that woman and her boy, you let us know before you let them on. Understood?" "Understood," the driver said, though his tone suggested he had no intention of doing any such thing. He snapped the reins, and the horses started moving. The coach rolled forward, picking up speed as it headed east toward Denver. And just like that, their only way out was leaving without them. Wade watched it go, his mind racing. They couldn't approach the station with those men watching, but they also couldn't stay hidden in the rocks forever. Eventually Crow would show up, or more men would arrive, or someone would spot them. They were trapped. Eli's voice was small and scared. "The coach is leaving." "I know, kid. We're not on it." "I know. What do we do now?" Wade was about to say he didn't know when something caught his eye. Movement in the trees on the far side of the clearing, opposite from where they were hiding. Someone else was here. Wade raised his rifle slowly, sighting along the barrel. For a moment he couldn't see anything. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, walking slowly toward the station. It was a young man, maybe 20, wearing dusty clothes and a gun belt. He looked nervous, his eyes darting between the three men at the station. "Hey," the young man called out. "Don't shoot! I'm not looking for trouble." The three men turned, hands going to their weapons. "Who the hell are you?" Clean Shirt demanded. "Name's Cooper. I'm with Crow's outfit." Wade's blood went cold. Clean Shirt relaxed slightly. "You're one of the trackers?" "Yeah, Crow sent me ahead to check the station. Wanted to know if anyone had shown up yet." "Nobody's shown up," the bearded man said. "We've been watching since dawn." Cooper nodded, but there was something off about him. He kept glancing toward the trees like he was expecting something or someone. "Crow's about 2 hours behind me," Cooper said. "He'll want to report when he gets here." "Then you can tell him we haven't seen the woman or the kid or the mountain man." Cooper's eyes swept the clearing again, and this time Wade saw something in the young man's face. Not just nervousness, fear. "Listen," Cooper said, his voice lower now. "I need to talk to you about something, about the job." "What about it?" "Maybe we should—" Cooper glanced at the empty landscape around them. "Talk somewhere private?" Clean Shirt frowned. "Why?" "Because I don't think we're alone out here." The three men went tense, hands moving to their guns. They started scanning the area more carefully now, and Wade pressed himself flat against the rock, barely breathing. Beside him, Clara had gone rigid, one hand over Eli's mouth to keep him silent. "You see something?" the bearded man asked Cooper. "No, but I feel it. You know what I mean? Like someone's watching. Could be animals. Could be the mountain man and his new friends." Clean Shirt drew his revolver. "If they're here, we'll find them. Spread out. Check the trees, the rocks." Everything. Wade cursed silently. They had maybe a minute before the men started searching and found them. He had to make a choice. Fight, which meant putting Clara and Eli in danger, or run, which meant leading the men away from the rocks and hoping the two of them could get clear. But before Wade could do anything, Cooper spoke again. "Wait," the young man said. "Before you do that, there's something I need to say." "What?" Cooper took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was shaking. "I can't do this anymore." Clean Shirt turned to look at him fully. "Can't do what?" "This. Hunting a woman and her kid. I signed up to track fugitives, not—" He gestured helplessly. "Not this." The nervous one laughed, sharp and uncomfortable. "Getting cold feet?" "I'm getting a conscience," Cooper shot back. "You know what Whitmore does to people? I've seen the ledgers. I know what we're helping cover up." "That's not our business," Clean Shirt said, his voice going cold. "Our business is finding Clara Whitmore and bringing her back. That's what we're getting paid to do." "We're getting paid to help a murderer silence a witness. We're getting paid $500 each. That's all that matters." Cooper shook his head. "Not to me. Not anymore." The bearded man had his gun out now, too. "You saying you're quitting?" "I'm saying I'm not helping you catch that woman." "Then you're a problem." Cooper's hand moved to his own gun, but he didn't draw it. "I'm leaving. Just let me walk away and we'll call it even." Clean Shirt smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Can't do that, Cooper. You know too much. You walk away, you might talk. And if you talk, Whitmore won't just come after you. He'll come after all of us for letting you go." "I won't say anything." "Yeah, you will. Sooner or later you'll grow a conscience about keeping quiet, too. That's the problem with having principles. They keep expanding." Cooper's face went pale. "So what, you're just going to kill me?" "I'm going to do what needs to be done." The clearing went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then everything happened at once. Cooper drew his gun. Clean Shirt fired first. The shot echoed across the clearing, loud as thunder, and Cooper staggered back, blood blooming across his chest. The young man dropped to his knees, his gun falling from his hand. He looked down at the wound, confused, like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Then he fell forward and didn't move. Clara's hand clamped over her mouth, stifling a gasp. Eli's eyes were wide with horror. Wade's mind was spinning. Cooper had just been murdered in cold blood, and the three men at the station didn't look bothered by it at all. The bearded man walked over and checked Cooper's body, then straightened up and nodded. "He's dead." "Good," Clean Shirt said, holstering his gun. "Drag him into the trees. We'll deal with the body later." They grabbed Cooper by the arms and started hauling him toward the forest. Not toward Wade's position, thankfully, but in the opposite direction. Wade made his decision. "Now," he whispered to Clara, "while they're distracted, run for the road, head east, follow the coach tracks. Don't stop, don't look back." "What about you?" "I'll catch up. Go." Clara hesitated for just a second, her eyes meeting his. Then she grabbed Eli and ran. Wade counted to 3, then stepped out from behind the rocks and fired his rifle into the air. The shot made the 3 men drop Cooper's body and spin around, going for their guns. Wade fired again, this time at the ground near their feet, sending dirt spraying. "You want to fight?" Wade shouted. "Here I am." He didn't wait for them to shoot back, just turned and ran in the opposite direction from Clara and Eli, crashing through the underbrush as loud as he could, drawing attention away from them. Behind him, he heard shouting, then gunfire. Bullets ripped through the trees around him, too close for comfort. Wade zigzagged, using the forest for cover, running until his lungs burned and his legs screamed. He could hear them chasing him, all 3 of them, from the sound of it, which meant they'd taken the bait, which meant Clara and Eli had a chance. Wade ran until he hit a steep slope and half ran, half fell down it, grabbing at branches to slow himself. He hit the bottom hard, rolled, and came up with his rifle ready. But the men weren't following anymore. They'd stopped at the top of the slope, smart enough to know that charging down would make them targets. "Give it up, mountain man," Clean Shirt called down. "You can't run forever." Wade didn't answer, just backed into the trees, keeping low, moving fast. He needed to circle back, needed to find Clara and Eli, needed to make sure they'd gotten away. But first he had to lose these 3. Wade ran for another 10 minutes, taking every twist and turn he could find until he was sure he'd put enough distance between them. Then he stopped, found a fallen log to crouch behind, and waited. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Wade's instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. He'd led the men away. Clara and Eli should have had plenty of time to get clear. They should be on the road by now, maybe even catching up to the stagecoach. But that feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. Wade stayed low and started working his way back toward the road, moving slow and quiet. It took him 20 minutes to cover ground he'd crossed in 5 while running. When he finally reached the edge of the clearing, he stopped and looked out. The stage station was empty now. No horses, no men, no bodies. Everything was gone. Wade's chest tightened. That wasn't right. Even if the men had given up chasing him, they should have come back here. Should have regrouped, checked the area, waited for Crow, unless they'd found something else to chase. Wade broke into a run, heading east along the road where he'd sent Clara and Eli. His eyes scanned the ground, looking for tracks. Found them. Small footprints, adult and child, running side by side. The tracks were clear in the soft dirt, easy to follow. Too easy. Wade ran faster, his heart pounding. The tracks led off the road and into the trees like Clara had tried to hide. Smart. But the men's tracks followed right after, and Wade could see where the horses had trampled the underbrush. They'd been found. Wade pushed harder, ignoring the burning in his legs. He could hear something up ahead now. Voices, shouting, then a scream. Eli. Wade burst into a small clearing and stopped cold. Clara was on her knees, held by the bearded man. Eli was being held by the nervous one, the boy struggling and crying. Clean Shirt stood in front of them, his gun pointed at Clara's head. And behind them, walking into the clearing from the opposite side, was Silas Crow. The tracker looked at Wade without surprise, like he'd been expecting him. "There you are," Crow said calmly. "We've been waiting." Wade's rifle came up, but he didn't pull the trigger. Couldn't. Not with Clean Shirt's gun pressed against Clara's temple, and Eli struggling in the nervous man's grip, tears streaming down the boy's face. "Lower the weapon," Crow said. Not a request. A command. Wade didn't move. "I said lower it." Crow's voice stayed calm, but his hand drifted toward his own gun. "You shoot anyone here, that woman dies before your bullet even leaves the barrel. You know it. I know it. So let's not pretend you've got options." Wade's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to do something, anything. But Crow was right. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and out of time. Slowly, Wade lowered the rifle. "On the ground," Crow said. Wade set the rifle down in the dirt, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. She was trying to stay calm for Eli, but Wade could see the terror underneath. "Now the knife. And don't get creative." Wade pulled the knife from his belt and dropped it beside the rifle. Crow nodded, satisfied. "Step back. Hands where I can see them." Wade took 3 steps back, raising his hands to shoulder height. His mind was racing, looking for any opening, any chance. Found nothing. Crow walked forward and picked up Wade's rifle, checking it over before slinging it across his own shoulder. "Nice weapon, well maintained. You take care of your tools." "What do you want?" Wade asked. "What I've wanted since Silver Creek. The ledgers Mrs. Whitmore stole from her husband. And since you've been helping her, I'm guessing you know where they are." Wade said nothing. Crow smiled slightly. "Strong, silent type, I respect that. But it won't help you here." He turned to Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore, where are the documents?" Clara's voice shook when she spoke. "I don't have them anymore." "That's a lie. It's not. I left them. Back at the cabin. Hidden." Crow studied her face, then shook his head. "You're a terrible liar. You wouldn't have run this far, risked this much, just to leave the only leverage you have sitting in some mountain cabin. Try again." Clara's eyes flicked to the leather bag on the ground beside her, just for a second. But it was enough. Crow saw it too. He gestured to the bearded man. "Check the bag." The bearded man let go of Clara and picked up the bag, rifling through it. He pulled out the bundle wrapped in oilcloth and tossed it to Crow. Crow caught it one-handed and unwrapped it slowly, his eyes scanning the papers inside. "Well, well, the famous ledgers. Victor's going to be relieved." "You can't give those to him," Clara said, her voice desperate. "You don't understand what's in there, what he's done." "I understand perfectly. Victor Whitmore is a ruthless son of a bitch who's stolen land, bribed officials, and had people killed to build his empire. Crow looked up from the papers, his expression unreadable. What you don't understand, Mrs. Whitmore, is that I don't care. People died because of him. People die every day. He'll kill me if you bring me back. You know he will. Crow didn't deny it, just rewrapped the ledgers and tucked them inside his coat. That's between you and your husband. Please, Clara's voice broke. Please, at least let my son go. He's just a child. He hasn't done anything wrong. Crow looked at Eli, who had stopped struggling and was just crying now, quiet and scared. For a moment, something shifted in the tracker's face. Not sympathy exactly, but something close to it. Then it was gone. The boy goes back with you, Crow said. Victor wants his family together. That's the deal. Wade had heard enough. What kind of man hunts a woman and her kid for money? Crow turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised. The kind who gets paid well. What kind of man throws his life away for strangers? The kind who can sleep at night. Sleep is overrated. Crow gestured to Clean Shirt. Tie them up. All three of them. We'll camp here tonight and head back to Silver Creek in the morning. Victor can deal with them however he wants. Clean Shirt pulled rope from his saddlebag and moved toward Clara. Wade's muscles tensed, ready to move, to fight, even though he knew it was suicide. But before Clean Shirt could reach Clara, the nervous man spoke up. His voice was shaky, uncertain. Mr. Crow, I don't think I can do this. Crow turned slowly. Excuse me? This doesn't feel right. What happened to Cooper, what we're doing to this woman and her kid, it's what we're being paid to do, Crow interrupted. Cooper made his choice. He's dead because he couldn't keep his mouth shut and his conscience in check. You want to end up the same way? The nervous man's hand was trembling on his gun. I'm not like Cooper. I'm not going to run, but I'm also not going to tie up a woman and her kid so he can do whatever he's planning to do to them. Then you're useless to me. Crow's hand moved toward his gun, and Wade saw what was about to happen a second before it did. Don't, Wade started. But the nervous man was already moving. He drew his gun and fired, not at Crow, but at the ground between them. A warning shot. I'm leaving, the nervous man said, backing toward his horse. I'm taking my share of the money for the days I worked, and I'm riding out of here. And if anyone tries to stop me, Crow shot him. The bullet hit the nervous man in the chest, dead center. He stumbled backward, his gun falling from his hand and collapsed against a tree. His eyes were wide, shocked, like he couldn't believe this was happening. Then they went empty. Eli screamed. Clara pulled him close, covering his eyes, but it was too late. The boy had seen everything. Wade's hands curled into fists, rage burning through him like fire. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Crow said, holstering his gun calmly. Can't have men questioning orders in the middle of a job. Sets a bad example. He was walking away. He was a liability. Crow looked at the bearded man in Clean Shirt. Anyone else having second thoughts? Now's the time to speak up. Neither man said anything. They looked shaken, but not enough to risk their lives over it. Good, Crow said. Now tie them up like I told you. Clean Shirt moved toward Clara again, but this time Wade stepped forward, putting himself between them. You want her tied up? You go through me first. Crow sighed, like Wade was being tedious. You really want to die for this woman? I want you to think about what you're doing. You're not just bringing Clara back to her husband. You're sending her and that boy to their deaths. You know it. Victor can't let them live, not after what they know. That's not my problem. It will be when federal investigators start asking questions. You think Victor's the only one who's going to fall when those ledgers go public? Everyone who helped him, everyone who knew what he was doing and looked the other way, they're all going down too, including you. Crow's eyes narrowed. The ledgers aren't going public. I'm giving them back to Victor. You think he's just going to destroy them? He's too smart for that. He'll keep them as insurance, and when the law finally catches up to him, he'll use those documents to drag everyone down with him, including the tracker who hunted his wife across Colorado. For the first time, Crow looked uncertain. You're bluffing. Am I? Victor Whitmore didn't build an empire by being loyal. He built it by being ruthless, and when he goes down, he'll take everyone he can with him. The clearing went quiet. Clean Shirt and the bearded man were watching Crow now, waiting to see what he'd do. Even Clara had stopped struggling, her eyes fixed on the tracker. Crow stood there for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he pulled the ledgers out of his coat and looked at them, really looked at them, like he was seeing them for the first time. "You know what's in here?" Crow asked Wade. "Enough. Enough to hang Victor Whitmore? Enough to hang half the territory." Crow flipped through a few pages, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up, something had changed in his eyes. Not kindness, not mercy, but calculation. "Let me ask you something, Mountain Man," Crow said. "If I let this woman and her boy go, if I let them get to Denver and hand these ledgers over to the federal commissioner, what happens to me?" Wade chose his words carefully. "That depends on what you do next." "Meaning?" "Meaning, if you're the one who helped get Clara to Denver, if you're the one who made sure those ledgers reached the right people, you're not an accomplice anymore. You're a witness. Maybe even a hero." Crow laughed, short and sharp. "A hero? That's rich. Better than being a dead man when Victor decides you know too much." Crow looked at Clara, then at Eli, then back at the ledgers in his hands. Wade could see him working through it, weighing his options, calculating the angles. Finally, Crow spoke. "You're right about one thing. Victor Whitmore is a bastard who'd sell out his own mother to save his skin, and I'm not interested in going down with him." He tossed the ledgers to Wade, who caught them reflexively. "What are you doing?" Clean Shirt demanded. "Changing the plan," Crow said. He turned to Clean Shirt and the bearded man, his hand resting on his gun. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to escort Mrs. Whitmore and her son to Denver. We're going to make sure those ledgers get into the hands of the federal commissioner, and we're going to cooperate with whatever investigation follows." "Have you lost your mind?" the bearded man said. "Victor will kill us." "Victor's going to prison, or he's going to hang. Either way, he won't be killing anyone." Crow's voice was hard now, no room for argument. "This is the only play that keeps us alive. You understand?" Clean Shirt and the bearded man looked at each other, then back at Crow. Slowly, reluctantly, they nodded. Wade didn't trust it, not for a second, but Clara's eyes were full of desperate hope, and Eli had stopped crying. "Why should we believe you?" Wade asked Crow. "Because I've spent the last 6 months working with federal investigators," Crow said, and the clearing went dead silent. Wade stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. I'm not just some tracker Victor hired. I'm an informant. Have been since February." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "You're lying." "I wish I was. Would have made my life a lot easier." Crow pulled a folded paper from inside his coat and handed it to Wade. "Read it." Wade unfolded the paper carefully. It was a letter, signed by a federal marshal named Garrett, authorizing Silas Crow to gather evidence against Victor Whitmore and his associates by any means necessary. "I don't understand," Clara said. "If you're working with the law, why did you chase us? Why did you—" "Because I had to make it look real," Crow interrupted. "Victor's not stupid. He's got eyes everywhere, people reporting back to him. If I just let you walk out of Silver Creek with those ledgers, he would have known something was wrong. But if I chased you, if I made a big show of hunting you down, he'd think everything was going according to plan." "You let your own men die," Wade said, his voice cold. "Cooper, the nervous one. They're dead because of your plan." Crow's jaw tightened. "Cooper was going to blow my cover. I couldn't let that happen. And the other one—" He stopped, looked away. "That was necessary too." "Necessary," Wade repeated, disgust heavy in the word. "You don't know what I've had to do to build this case, the lines I've had to cross. Victor Whitmore has killed dozens of people, maybe more. If I have to sacrifice 2 men to stop him, that's a price I'm willing to pay." "Easy to say when you're not the one paying it." "Nothing about this has been easy." Crow's voice was sharp now, defensive. "You think I wanted to hunt a terrified woman and her kid across the mountains? You think I enjoyed watching that boy cry every time we got close? I did what I had to do." Wade wanted to hit him, wanted to put a bullet in him for every person who died because of his plan. But Clara's hand was on his arm now, stopping him. "If you're really working with the Federals," Clara said carefully, "then you can protect us. You can make sure Victor doesn't—" "I can try," Crow said. "But Victor's got resources, money, connections, people who owe him favors. Even with these ledgers, it's going to take time to build a case strong enough to arrest him. And in that time, he's going to be looking for you. So what do we do? Crow thought for a moment. We get you to Denver tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. I've got contacts there who can keep you safe until we're ready to move on Victor, but it means traveling through the night, no stops, no rest. Clara looked at Eli, who was exhausted, barely able to stand. He can't. He'll have to, Crow said, not unkindly, because if we wait until morning, Victor will know something's wrong. He's expecting a report from me by sundown. When he doesn't get it, he'll come looking, and I'd rather be in Denver with federal marshals around us when that happens. Wade looked at the ledgers in his hands, then at Clara and Eli. The boy was leaning against his mother, his eyes half closed. They'd been running for weeks, and it showed. There's another problem, Wade said. What? Victor knows where Clara's family is, her sister, in Glenwood Springs. If he thinks Clara's going to testify against him, he'll go after anyone she cares about. Clara's face went white. Emma. He'll go after Emma. Who's Emma? Crow asked. My sister. She doesn't know anything about the ledgers, she's not involved in any of this, but Victor, Clara's voice cracked. He'll hurt her just to hurt me, Crow swore under his breath. Where's Glenwood Springs from here? North, Wade said. Maybe 40 miles. And Denver's southeast, opposite directions. I know. Crow paced for a moment, thinking. We split up. I'll take Mrs. Whitmore and the boy to Denver. You ride to Glenwood Springs and warn the sister. Get her somewhere safe. No, Clara said immediately. I'm not leaving Eli. Clara. No, I've been running for weeks. I've been separated from everyone I love, and I'm not doing it again. Eli stays with me. Crow looked like he wanted to argue, but Wade cut him off. She's right. You split them up now. Victor wins. He wants that boy. Wants to use him as leverage. We keep them together. Then what do you suggest? Wade looked at the sun, low on the horizon. They had maybe 2 hours of daylight left, less if the clouds kept building. We go to Glenwood Springs first, all of us. Warn the sister, get her to safety, then head to Denver. It'll take longer, but it'll give Victor time to catch up, Crow finished. Maybe, but it's better than leaving Clara's sister defenseless. Crow didn't look happy about it, but he nodded. Fine, but we move fast. And if we run into trouble, no heroics. We get the ledgers to Denver, no matter what. Understood? Wade understood. He also knew he'd throw that plan out the window the second Clara or Eli were in real danger. But he didn't say that out loud. They gathered their things quickly. Clean Shirt and the bearded man brought the horses around, still looking uneasy about the sudden change in plans. Crow gave them each a hard look. You two have a problem with this? Crow asked. No, sir, Clean Shirt said, though his voice said otherwise. Good, because if you even think about running back to Victor, I'll hunt you down myself. Clear? They nodded. Wade helped Clara onto one of the horses, then lifted Eli up in front of her. The boy wrapped his arms around his mother's waist and closed his eyes, too tired to do anything else. Crow mounted his big gray and looked back at the bodies they were leaving behind. Cooper and the nervous man, dead in the dirt. We'll send someone back for them later. If there's a later, Wade muttered. They rode north as the sun sank toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Wade of blood and fire. The temperature dropped fast once the light faded, and by the time full dark hit, they were all shivering. Eli fell asleep in the saddle, held upright only by Clara's arms around him. Wade rode beside them, watching the boy's face relax in sleep, so peaceful it almost hurt to look at. Crow pushed them hard, stopping only twice to rest the horses. Wade's legs ached, his back screamed, and exhaustion pulled at him like a weight tied around his neck. But he kept going. They all did. It was past midnight when they finally saw the lights of Glenwood Springs in the distance. A small cluster of buildings huddled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys. Crow called a halt just outside town. Where does the sister live? Clara gave him an address, and Crow nodded. You three stay here. I'll ride in, check if it's safe. I'm coming with you, Clara said. No, you're not. If Victor's already here, I need to know before you walk into a trap. If he's already here, my sister might be dead. Then there's nothing you can do for her. But if she's alive, I'll get her out. Crow looked at Wade. Keep them here. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, assume the worst and ride for Denver. Before Wade could argue, Crow kicked his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Wade, Clara, and Eli waited in the trees, silent and tense. The minutes crawled by. Wade counted them in his head, watching the town, looking for movement. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Clara was gripping the reins so tight her knuckles were white. Something's wrong. Give him a few more minutes. Wade, a few more minutes. But Wade was thinking the same thing. Crow should have been back by now. Either the sister wasn't there or something had gone very wrong. Wade was about to suggest they move in when he heard hoofbeats, fast, coming from the town. Crow burst out of the darkness, his horse at full gallop. Behind him, riding double, was a woman who had to be Emma, same dark hair as Clara, same sharp eyes. And behind them, maybe 100 yards back, were more riders. At least 6, maybe more. "Ride!" Crow shouted as he passed. "Now!" Wade didn't waste time asking questions. He grabbed the reins of Clara's horse and kicked his own into motion. They took off running, heading northeast now toward Denver, the sound of pursuit loud behind them. Clara looked back at the riders chasing them, and even in the darkness, Wade could see the fear on her face. "Is that Victor?" she shouted over the wind. Crow glanced back. "Yeah, that's him." Wade's blood went cold. Victor Whitmore wasn't sitting in Silver Creek waiting for reports anymore. He was here, now, chasing them himself, which meant everything had just gotten a lot worse. They rode through the night like the devil himself was chasing them, which wasn't far from the truth. Victor Whitmore might not have horns and a pitchfork, but from what Wade had seen in those ledgers, he was close enough. The horses were exhausted, foam flecking their mouths, but Crow pushed them harder. Behind them, the riders were gaining. Wade could hear them now, the thunder of hooves, the shouts of men who knew they were close to their prize. Emma clung to Crow's back, her face pressed against his shoulder. She hadn't said a word since they'd fled Glenwood Springs, just held on and tried not to fall off. Clara kept looking back at her sister, her face tight with guilt. "We're not going to make it," the bearded man shouted. "The horses can't keep this pace." "They'll keep it until we reach the relay station," Crow shouted back. 2 more miles. 2 miles might as well be 20 at this speed. Crow didn't answer, just urged his horse faster. Wade rode beside Clara and Eli, one hand on his rifle, ready for the moment when words stopped working and bullets started flying. The boy was awake now, clinging to his mother, his small body rigid with fear. A shot rang out from behind them. The bullet went wide, hitting a tree trunk 20 feet to their left. Warning shot, or bad aim. Either way, it meant Victor's men were close enough to fire. "They're trying to spook the horses," Wade called to Crow. "Make us crash." "I know. Stay tight. Keep moving." Another shot, this one closer. Wade heard it zip past his head, close enough to feel the displacement of air. Clara made a sound, half gasp, half sob, and pulled Eli tighter against her. "Don't look back," Wade told her. Just hold on." But she looked back anyway, and Wade did too. He could see them clearly now, 6 riders, maybe 7, strung out in a line. The lead rider was on a big black horse, sitting tall in the saddle despite the breakneck pace. Even from a distance, Wade recognized him. Victor Whitmore. The man himself, come to collect what he thought belonged to him. The relay station appeared ahead like salvation, a rough building with a corral and fresh horses already saddled. Crow must have sent word ahead somehow, arranged it. The man was thorough. Wade had to give him that. They thundered into the station yard, and Crow was off his horse before it even stopped moving. "Switch mounts! 30 seconds, no more!" Wade grabbed Eli and lifted him down while Clara dismounted. Her legs buckled when she hit the ground, exhausted, but Emma was there to catch her. The sisters held each other for just a moment, no words needed. Clean Shirt and the bearded man were already switching horses, working fast. Wade helped Clara and Eli onto a fresh mount, then grabbed one for himself. The animal was nervous, spooked by the commotion, but Wade got it under control. "Go!" Crow shouted. "Now!" They kicked their horses and took off again, leaving the exhausted animals behind. The fresh mounts were faster, stronger, and for a few precious minutes they pulled ahead. But Victor's men reached the relay station and didn't stop to change horses. Just kept coming on their tired animals, pushing them past their limits. Wade saw one horse stumble and nearly go down, but the rider kept it moving through sheer force of will. These weren't just hired guns. These were men who knew what would happen to them if they came back empty-handed. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, that pale gray that came before dawn. Wade could make out more details now, the faces of the men chasing them, the determination in their eyes. And in the lead, Victor Whitmore's face was carved from stone, cold and focused. They rode through a narrow canyon, rock walls rising on either side. Bad terrain for an ambush, worse for escape. If Victor's men got ahead of them somehow, they'd be trapped. But the canyon opened up into a wide valley, and in the distance Wade could see buildings. Not a small town this time. Actual city buildings, brick and stone, the outskirts of Denver spreading before them like a promise. "Almost there," Crow shouted. 10 more minutes." But 10 minutes might as well have been forever. Victor's men were close enough now that Wade could hear them calling to each other, coordinating. They were planning something. 3 riders broke away from the group, spurring their horses harder, trying to flank them, cut them off before they reached the city limits. "Crow!" Wade shouted, pointing. Crow saw it. His jaw tightened. "Clara, you keep riding straight for Denver. Don't stop for anything. The federal building is on 14th Street, stone structure. You can't miss it. Ask for Marshal Garrett." "What are you doing?" "Buying you time." Crow looked at Clean Shirt and the bearded man. "You two with me. We're going to slow them down." The bearded man looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't, just nodded and pulled his rifle from its saddle holster. Crow looked at Wade. "Mountain Man, you stay with the women and the boy. Get them to Garrett. Make sure those ledgers reach his hands." Wade wanted to go with them, wanted to fight, but Clara and Eli needed him more. "Don't get yourself killed," Wade said. Crow smiled, quick and sharp. "Not planning on it." Then he and his 2 men peeled off, riding hard toward the flanking riders. Wade watched them go, then turned back to Clara. "Come on, we're not stopping now." They pushed forward, entering the outskirts of Denver. The streets were starting to wake up, shopkeepers opening their doors, early risers heading to work, a few carriages already rattling over the cobblestones. Behind them, Wade heard gunfire. Multiple shots, rapid. He forced himself not to look back. Clara's horse was flagging, the animal's sides heaving. Emma's wasn't much better, but the federal building was close now. Wade could see it at the end of the street. Then a rider burst out of an alley ahead of them, cutting them off. Wade's hand went to his gun, but he stopped when he saw the man's face. Not one of Victor's men. This was someone else, young, wearing a deputy's badge, his eyes wide with alarm. "Mrs. Whitmore," the deputy called out. Clara pulled her horse to a stop, breathing hard. "Yes? Marshal Garrett sent me to watch for you. He got word you were coming." The deputy looked past them, toward the sound of gunfire. "We need to get you inside, now." Wade didn't ask how Garrett had known. Crow must have sent word ahead through whatever network of informants he'd built. Smart. The deputy led them to the federal building at a gallop. They dismounted in front, and more deputies appeared, surrounding them, creating a protective barrier. Wade kept Eli close, one hand on the boy's shoulder. Marshal Garrett himself came down the steps, a tall man with gray hair and a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. His eyes went straight to Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have the documents?" Clara pulled the leather bag from where she'd been clutching it against her chest and handed it over. Garrett opened it, looked inside, and nodded once. "Get them inside," he told his deputies, "all of them." They were hustled into the building, through doors that closed and locked behind them. The sudden quiet was jarring after hours of running. Wade's ears were still ringing with the sound of hooves and gunfire. They were led to an office on the 2nd floor. Large windows looked out over the street, and through them Wade could see more deputies gathering outside, rifles ready. Eli finally let go of his mother and collapsed into a chair, his face pale. Emma sat beside him, stroking his hair, whispering something Wade couldn't hear. Clara stood by the window watching the street, her arms wrapped around herself. Wade moved beside her. "You're safe now." "Am I?" Clara's voice was hollow. "Victor's still out there. He's not going to just give up." As if summoned by her words, Victor Whitmore appeared at the end of the street. He was riding slowly now, his men gathered around him. They stopped about 50 yards from the federal building just out of rifle range. Marshal Garrett came into the office, still holding the ledgers. He followed Clara's gaze to the window, and his expression hardened. "That him?" "Yes," Clara whispered. Garrett watched Victor for a moment, then turned to Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you some questions about these documents. Everything you know about how your husband acquired them, who was involved, what crimes they detail. Can you do that? Yes, but my son, one of my deputies will take him and your sister to a safe room. They'll be comfortable, protected. You have my word. Clara looked at Eli, who was half asleep already, exhausted beyond measure. She nodded. A female deputy came in and gently led Eli and Emma away. Eli looked back at his mother once, his eyes asking a question he was too tired to speak aloud. I'll be right here, Clara told him. I promise. The door closed behind them, and Garrett sat down behind his desk, opening the ledgers. Start from the beginning, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't leave anything out. Wade moved toward the door, thinking Clara should have privacy for this, but she called him back. Wade, stay, please. So he stayed, stood by the window and watched Victor Whitmore sitting on his horse in the street, waiting. For what? Wade didn't know. The man had to know it was over. The ledgers were in federal hands. His wife was under protection. There was nothing left to do but ride away and try to disappear before the warrants were issued. But Victor didn't move. Just sat there, staring at the building like he could burn it down with his eyes alone. Clara spent 2 hours answering Garrett's questions. She spoke clearly, precisely, going through each entry in the ledgers, explaining what Victor had done and how. Names, dates, properties seized, bribes paid, people who had disappeared. The list went on until Wade's stomach turned listening to it. This wasn't just corruption. This was systematic destruction of lives, carried out with cold calculation over years. When Clara finally finished, Garrett sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He looked older than he had when they had arrived. This is enough, he said quietly. More than enough. Victor Whitmore is going to prison for the rest of his life if he doesn't hang first. You can arrest him? Clara asked. I can. I will. Garrett stood up and walked to the window, looking down at Victor. But I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Whitmore. Your husband has friends in high places, powerful people who've benefited from his crimes. They're going to fight this. They're going to use every legal trick they know to delay, to obstruct, to make this case disappear. Can they do that? They do. They can try, but they won't succeed. Not with this evidence. Garrett tapped the ledgers. These are ironclad. Every entry is documented, dated, signed, and you're willing to testify? Yes. Then we'll win. It might take time, but we'll win. Wade wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that justice actually meant something in this world. But he'd seen too much, lost too much, to have faith in systems built by men who could be bought. As if reading his thoughts, Garrett looked at him. You're the one who helped her get here. Wade Mercer, right? Right. Crow told me about you in his reports. Said you risked your life for a woman and child you barely knew. Wasn't about knowing them. No? What was it about? Wade looked at Clara, who was watching him with tired, grateful eyes. It was about being able to look at myself in a mirror. Garrett nodded slowly, like that was an answer he understood. Well, Mr. Mercer, you did a good thing. And if you ever need work, federal marshals can always use men who know the mountains. Pay's not great, but it's steady. Wade almost smiled. Almost. I'll think about it. A commotion outside drew their attention back to the window. Crow was riding up the street, clean shirt and the bearded man behind him. All three were covered in dust and what looked like blood, but they were alive. They dismounted in front of the building, and Crow looked up at the window where Wade and Garrett stood. Even from a distance, Wade could see the exhaustion on the tracker's face. Then Crow did something Wade didn't expect. He walked directly toward Victor Whitmore. What's he doing? Clara asked, alarm in her voice. I don't know, Garrett said, but he moved toward the door, hand on his gun. Wade followed them down to the street, Clara right behind him. They emerged from the building just as Crow reached Victor. The two men sat on their horses, facing each other. Victor's men had their hands on their guns, but they didn't draw. Not with federal deputies surrounding them, rifles aimed and ready. It's over, Victor, Crow said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. Victor's face was carved from ice. You're a dead man, Crow. Maybe, but not today. Today, you're the one who's finished. The ledgers are with Marshal Garrett. Your wife's under federal protection, and every crime you've committed, every person you've destroyed, it's all going to come out. You think you've won? Victor's voice was quiet, dangerous. You have no idea what you've started. The people I work with, the people who've helped me build this empire, They're not going to let some tracker and a federal marshal take it all down. Those people are going to run the moment they see the evidence. They're going to turn on you faster than you turned on everyone else. Victor's jaw tightened. For the first time, Wade saw something crack in that stone facade. Fear. Real fear. "Where's my son?" Victor asked. "Safe," Crow said. "Somewhere you'll never touch him." "He's my son. You can't keep him from me." "Watch me." Victor's hand moved toward his gun, and immediately a dozen rifles cocked around him. He froze, his hand hovering over the weapon. "Don't!" Garrett called out. "You draw that gun! You're a dead man. Surrender now, and you'll live long enough to stand trial." For a long moment, Victor didn't move. His eyes swept across the scene, the deputies, the rifles, Crow sitting calmly on his horse. Then his gaze found Clara, standing on the steps of the federal building. Their eyes met, and Wade saw something pass between them. Not love. That had died long ago, if it had ever existed. But recognition. The understanding that this was the end. "You think you're free now," Victor said to Clara. His voice carried across the street, cold and clear. "You think you've won, but you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if today's the day someone comes for you, wondering if your sister is safe, wondering if your son—" "That's enough," Garrett cut him off. He gestured to his deputies. "Arrest him. Charges are fraud, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other counts I'll detail later." The deputies moved in. Victor's men scattered immediately, not willing to die for their boss. Smart of them. Victor himself sat still as stone while they pulled him off his horse and put manacles on his wrists. He didn't fight, didn't resist, just stared at Clara the whole time, his face blank but his eyes burning with rage. As they led him toward the building, he passed right by Clara. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, just watched him like he was already gone, already forgotten. "I'll kill you for this," Victor whispered as he passed. "One way or another, you're dead." Clara's voice was steady when she answered. "You're not the first man to threaten me, and you won't be the last. But the difference is, I'm not afraid of you anymore." Victor stopped walking. For just a second, confusion flickered across his face, like he couldn't comprehend a world where Clara wasn't terrified of him. Then the deputies pulled him forward, and he was gone, disappearing into the federal building. Clara's legs gave out. Wade caught her before she hit the ground, holding her up while she shook with sobs that came from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd been holding back for years. "It's over," Wade said quietly. "It's really over." Clara cried for a long time. Emma came down and held her sister while Wade stepped back, giving them space. He felt like an intruder on something private, something that belonged to the two women who'd survived hell and come out the other side. Crow walked over, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "That was closer than I'd like." "You get hit?" "Nicked. I've had worse." Crow looked at Clara and Emma. "She did it. Actually did it. Most people would have given up halfway through. She's stronger than she looks. Stronger than I gave her credit for." Crow pulled out a cigar, then seemed to think better of it and put it away. "Garrett's going to need you to give a statement about everything that happened. You up for that?" Wade nodded. "Yeah." "Good. After that, you're free to go, back to your mountain, if that's what you want." Was it? Wade wasn't sure anymore. 3 years on that mountain, alone with his grief and his memories. It had seemed like enough, like all he needed. But now, standing here in the morning sun, watching Clara hold her sister and knowing Eli was safe inside, Wade realized something. The mountain hadn't healed him. It had just frozen him in place, kept him from moving forward or back. Maybe it was time to thaw out. Wade spent the next 2 hours giving his statement to Marshal Garrett. Every detail, every conversation, every moment from the saloon in Silver Creek to Victor's arrest. Garrett took notes, asked questions, and didn't react when Wade admitted to some things that weren't strictly legal. When they finished, Garrett offered his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. You saved that woman's life, and probably a lot of others, by getting those ledgers here." Wade shook his hand. "Just did what needed doing." "Most people don't. That's what makes it worth something." Wade left the office and found Clara in a sitting room down the hall. Eli was asleep on a couch beside her, his head in her lap. Emma was there too, talking quietly with a deputy about arrangements for protection until the trial. Clara looked up when Wade entered. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. Really smiling, for the first time since he'd met her. "Hey," she said softly so as not to wake Eli. "Hey." "They told me Victor's being held in a cell downstairs. Maximum security. He's not getting out." "Good." Clara stroked Eli's hair gently. "Garrett said the trial might take months, maybe longer. And we'll have to testify, Eli and I. Have to stand up in front of everyone and tell them what Victor did. You can do that." "I know. I'm not afraid anymore. Isn't that strange? A week ago, I was terrified every second, and now—" She looked down at her sleeping son. "Now I just feel tired." Wade sat down in a chair across from them. His own exhaustion was catching up with him now, hitting him like a wave. "You should rest. Both of you." "What about you? Where will you go?" Wade hadn't thought about it. His cabin was still up in the mountains, waiting. His old life, ready to resume. But looking at Clara and Eli, at the peace on their faces despite everything they'd been through, Wade realized he didn't want that life anymore. Didn't want to hide from the world. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. Clara studied his face for a moment. "Garrett offered you a job. As a marshal. You heard that? The walls are thin. Are you going to take it?" Wade thought about it. Spending his days hunting criminals instead of game, working with people instead of avoiding them. It was the opposite of everything he'd built for himself over the past 3 years, which was probably exactly what he needed. "Maybe," Wade said. "Haven't decided yet." "You'd be good at it. You're good at protecting people." "I'm good at surviving. That's different." "Is it?" Clara's eyes were gentle. "You could have left us in that saloon, Wade. Could have walked away at any point. But you didn't. Because it's not about surviving for you. It's about making sure other people can survive too." Wade didn't know what to say to that. The words felt too big, too generous for a man who'd spent 3 years eating alone in the dark. "Your wife," Clara said quietly. "Rebecca, what would she think of what you did? Helping us?" Wade's throat tightened. "She would have done the same, probably would have done it better." "I don't believe that. I think you did exactly what she would have wanted." Maybe. Rebecca had always been the brave one, the one who ran toward trouble instead of away from it. Maybe some of that had rubbed off on Wade after all. Eli stirred in his sleep, mumbling something Wade couldn't make out. Clara hushed him softly, and the boy settled back into sleep. "We're going to stay in Denver for a while," Clara said. "Until the trial. Garrett's arranging a house for us, somewhere safe. After that—" She trailed off, looking uncertain. "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. You'll figure it out." "Will I? I've never lived on my own, Wade. I went from my father's house to Victor's. I don't know how to be independent." "You've been independent for the last 3 weeks. You survived. Because you helped me. I gave you a horse and showed you some trails. You did the rest." Clara smiled at that, small but real. "Thank you. For everything. I know I've said it 100 times, but then stop saying it." Wade's voice was gentle, not harsh. "You don't owe me anything. You never did. I owe you my life. Then live it. That's payment enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside the window, Denver was waking up properly now. The streets filling with people, the sounds of commerce and conversation drifting up. Normal life, continuing like nothing had happened. Like a woman and her son hadn't nearly been killed. Like justice hadn't been served by the narrowest margin. Emma came back from talking with the deputy, and she looked at Clara with concern. "They want us to move to the safe house this afternoon, get settled before dark." Clara nodded. "All right." Emma looked at Wade. "Are you coming with us?" "No," Wade said. "You'll have federal protection. You don't need me anymore." "Maybe we don't need you," Emma said. "But you're welcome anyway. If you want." Wade thought about it. A house in Denver, surrounded by people. No mountains in sight. It sounded terrible. It also sounded like exactly what he needed. "I'll think about it," he said. Later that afternoon, Wade stood on the steps of the federal building and watched Clara, Eli, and Emma climb into a carriage that would take them to the safe house. Eli waved at him from the window, and Wade waved back. Crow appeared beside him, still looking like he'd been through a war. "You sticking around?" "For a while." "Good. Garrett's going to need you when the trial starts. Character witness, that sort of thing. Wade nodded. He hadn't thought that far ahead, but it made sense. What about you? Wade asked. Me? Crow pulled out his cigar again, and this time he lit it. I'm done with undercover work. Nearly got killed 3 times in the last week. That's my limit. He took a long drag, exhaling smoke. Garrett offered me a position training new marshals, desk job mostly, boring. You gonna take it? Probably. I'm getting too old for this shit. Wade almost laughed at that. Crow couldn't have been more than 40. They stood there for a while, watching the city move around them. Finally, Crow spoke again. You ever think about what would have happened if you just kept eating your dinner that night? Ignored the woman and the kid? Wade had thought about it. They'd be dead. Or worse. And you'd be back on your mountain alone. Yeah. Would that have been better? Wade considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. Alone was safe. Alone meant no one could hurt you, no one could leave you. But alone also meant no one could save you when you were drowning. And Wade had been drowning for 3 years without realizing it. No, Wade said finally. It wouldn't have been better. Crow nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. Good. Because I've seen a lot of men disappear into the wilderness after losing someone. Most of them never come back. And the ones who do, he shook his head. They're not really alive anymore, just going through the motions. You speaking from experience? Maybe. Lost my brother a while back. Thought about disappearing myself. But then I figured, what would that prove? He's gone either way. At least this way I can do something with the time I've got left. It was the most personal thing Crow had said since Wade met him. The tracker wasn't just cold and calculating. He was a man who'd survived his own grief and come out the other side. Maybe that was possible for Wade, too. I should go, Wade said. Get cleaned up. Find a place to stay. There's a boarding house 2 blocks west. Clean rooms, decent food. Tell Mrs. Patterson that Garrett sent you. She'll give you a fair rate. Wade thanked him and started to leave, but Crow called him back. Hey, mountain man. Wade turned. You did good. Better than good. That woman and her kid are alive because of you. Don't forget that. Wade nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He walked through Denver for a while, letting the city flow around him. It was loud, crowded, overwhelming, everything the mountain wasn't. And Wade realized he didn't hate it. He found the boarding house Crow had mentioned and rented a room for a week. It was small, simple, with a window that looked out over the street. The bed was soft, the sheets clean. It felt strange after years of sleeping on hard ground. Wade lay down, just for a moment, and closed his eyes. When he woke up, it was dark outside. He'd slept through the entire afternoon and into evening. His body ached, his head was fuzzy, but he felt more rested than he had in days. Wade stood up and looked out the window. The street was quieter now, just a few people walking home after work. Lamps were being lit in windows, families gathering for dinner. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life Wade had given up when Rebecca died. Maybe it was time to try again. Over the next few weeks, Wade settled into a routine. He gave his testimony at the preliminary hearings, watching Victor Whitmore sit stone-faced while lawyers argued about evidence and jurisdiction. The man never looked at Clara, never acknowledged Eli, just stared straight ahead like he was already somewhere else. The trial itself was scheduled for 2 months out, giving prosecutors time to build their case. In the meantime, Wade took Garrett up on his offer, not as a marshal, not yet, but as a consultant, helping train deputies in wilderness, tracking, and survival. It was strange, teaching other people skills he'd learned alone, but it felt good too, useful. He visited Clara and Eli at the safe house a few times, watched Eli slowly come back to life, the fear in his eyes fading day by day. The kid even laughed once, a real laugh, and Wade felt something in his chest unclench. Clara was changing too, growing stronger, more confident. She'd started helping Emma with work. Emma had been a seamstress before all this, and she was teaching Clara the trade. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, independent work. One evening, about a month after Victor's arrest, Clara invited Wade to dinner. Emma cooked, and they all sat around a small table in the safe house. Clara, Emma, Eli, and Wade. The conversation was light, easy. No talk of trials or danger or fear. Just 4 people sharing a meal. After dinner, Eli asked Wade to tell him about the mountains. So Wade did, describing the peaks and valleys, the creeks and caves, the animals that lived there. The boy listened with wide eyes, fascinated. "Can we go there sometime?" Eli asked. "To the mountains?" Clara looked uncertain. "Maybe when you're older." "I could show you," Wade said before he could stop himself. "When all this is over, when it's safe, I could take you up to my cabin, show you around." Eli's face lit up. "Really?" Wade looked at Clara, who was watching him with something soft in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "Really?" Wade said. As Wade walked back to his boarding house that night, he thought about the cabin, about whether he'd go back there permanently once the trial was over. Maybe. Maybe not. For the first time in 3 years, Wade had options. He could return to the mountain and live out his days in solitude, or he could stay in Denver, build something new. Either way, he wouldn't be running anymore, wouldn't be hiding from life. Rebecca would have been proud of that. Wade liked to think so anyway. The trial happened on a cold morning in October. The courthouse was packed with people, journalists, politicians, families of Victor's victims. Clara sat in the front row, Eli beside her, both dressed in their best clothes. Emma was there too, and Crow, and Marshall Garrett. Wade sat in the back, watching. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, calling witness after witness. Clara testified for 2 full days, detailing every crime she knew about, every life Victor had destroyed. She didn't cry, didn't falter, just spoke the truth in a clear, steady voice. Eli testified too, briefly. The prosecutor kept it short, asking only whether his father had hurt his mother. Eli said yes. That was all the jury needed to hear. Victor's lawyers tried to discredit the evidence, to paint Clara as a vengeful wife, to suggest the ledgers had been forged. But they couldn't explain away the signatures, the dates, the corroborating witnesses who came forward once they knew it was safe. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous, guilty, on all counts. The judge sentenced Victor Whitmore to 40 years in a federal prison, with no possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in noise, some people cheering, others crying. Victor sat motionless, his face blank. As they led him away in chains, he looked at Clara one last time. She stared back, and this time she didn't look afraid. Didn't look angry. She just looked free. After the trial, the safe house was no longer necessary. Clara and Emma rented a small house on the edge of Denver. Nothing fancy, but theirs. They opened a dressmaking shop together, taking in work from the neighborhood. It wasn't easy. Money was tight, and there were nights when Clara wondered if they'd make it. But they did. Slowly, steadily, they built a life. Eli started school, made friends, became a normal kid again. He still had nightmares sometimes, but they were getting less frequent, and he was smiling more, laughing more. Healing takes time. Clara was learning that. Wade stayed in Denver. He took the job with the federal marshals, officially this time. It turned out he was good at it, tracking fugitives, bringing in criminals, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't the mountain, but it was enough. He visited Clara and Eli often, became part of their lives in a quiet, steady way. He was there when Eli graduated from grade school, there when Emma got married to a carpenter she'd met at church, there when Clara's dress shop finally turned a profit. And one summer evening, 3 years after that night in the saloon, Wade kept his promise. He took Clara and Eli up to his cabin in the mountains. They hiked the trails Wade had walked alone for so long. Eli ran ahead, exploring everything, while Clara walked beside Wade, taking in the beauty of the wilderness. "I can see why you stayed here," she said. "It's peaceful." "It was," Wade said, "but it was also lonely." "Do you ever miss it, the solitude?" Wade thought about that. "Sometimes, but not enough to give up what I have now." "And what's that?" Wade looked at Eli, laughing as he tried to skip stones across a creek. Then at Clara, her face relaxed and happy in the mountain air. "This," Wade said simply. They spent 2 days at the cabin. Wade taught Eli how to fish, how to track deer, how to build a fire properly. Clara learned too, asking questions, engaging with the world around her in a way she'd never been allowed to before. On the last evening, they sat around the fire Wade had built outside the cabin. The stars were brilliant overhead, thousands of them, more than you could ever see in the city. Eli fell asleep against his mother, and Clara held him close. "Thank you," she said to Wade, "for all of it." Wade smiled. "Thought we agreed you'd stop thanking me." "I lied." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals. And Wade thought about Rebecca, about how she'd always believed that people were meant to help each other, that kindness wasn't weakness, but strength. She'd been right. It had just taken Wade 3 years and a desperate woman in a saloon to figure it out. Some lessons take time, but they're worth learning. Years later, when Eli was grown with children of his own, he'd tell them the story of the mountain man who saved his mother. He'd describe Wade as a hero, larger than life, fearless and strong. And in the way that stories do, it would become legend. The details would shift, the truth would blur, until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But one part would always stay the same. The part where a lonely man chose kindness over isolation, where he decided that some things were worth fighting for, even if they weren't his fight to begin with. That part was true, would always be true, and it made all the difference.